there, I'm Jennifer from my-colorado-kitchen.com, where I bring from scratch recipes straight from my Colorado kitchen to yours. Today we are going to make a 4-layer vintage Easter cake. A vintage Easter cake is something that was made long ago that uses 4 different layers because we're going to use egg yolks for a yellow layer and we're going to use egg whites for a white layer, and we're going to alternate the layers. We're going to make a citrus frosting to go on top, and back in the 19th and 20th centuries, citrus was just coming into the season. It was the renewal of spring and just the hope that Easter would bring with this Easter cake. So we're going to make that today. Let's get started. The first thing we need to do is preheat our oven to 350 degrees, and then we need to prep our pans. So because we're doing a 4-layer vintage Easter cake, we need 4 different pans, and don't fret if you don't have 4 pans, you can do 2 and then 2. I happen to have 4 of the cake pans, so mine are 9-inch cake pans. These are non-stick cake pans. They are definitely not my favorite. I've pretty much switched out everything in my kitchen to not be non-stick, but these are some of the last holdouts. So it is what it is. We will use them. I will link some in the description below for either some that don't have the PUFAs in them or some silicone ones that you could use instead. So we need to grab our pan. We're going to butter it, and then we're going to put flour on top of it. So I have some already soft butter here, and I'm just going to use my fingers, and I'm just going to butter this pan. You'll do that with all 4 pans, or if you only have 2, obviously do it with the 2 that you have. I got pretty good at this because growing up, this used to be my job when I would help my mom in the kitchen. All right, and once our pans are all buttered, then we're gonna just sprinkle a little bit of flour in them to just coat the inside of the pan. I like to just twirl it around in a circle, kind of tapping the edges just to get the flour to go all around the edge. And then once your pan is coated, then I typically transfer the flour into the next one so it's ready to go. And that's what it'll look like when it's completed. You'll repeat for all 4 pans, or 2 if you're only using 2 at the moment. Okay, once our pans are all buttered and floured and prepped, then we are going to start baking our first 2-layer cakes. So we're going to start with the yellow layer, and what we need to do is we need to take a 1/2 cup of butter. So this stick, I use the Kirkland grass-fed butter. This one is actually a full cup, so we're going to split it in half, and we're going to use half for our yellow layers and then half for our white layers. Then we're going to cream 1 cup of sugar with our butter. I like to use organic cane sugar. Once that is successfully creamed, then we need to add our 3 egg yolks and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So we first need to separate the egg whites and the egg yolks. I do this by taking an egg, cracking it in half, and then just moving the yolk back and forth until the white and the yolk become separated. We will set our egg whites aside. We're going to take our egg yolks and we're going to put those in the mixer. We're going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Then we're going to mix that up. So once that's all mixed up, we need to do our dry ingredients. So we're going to grab a separate bowl, and we're going to get our flour, and we're going to do 2 cups all-purpose flour. Next, we're going to add 3 teaspoons of baking powder. We're going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We'll mix that all together. Then we're going to get a separate measure, and we're going to add in 1 cup of milk to that. We're going to add half of our flour mixture and half of our milk, and we're just going to alternate and add it to our mixer and let it mix up. Once that is all mixed up, we are going to take that batter and we're gonna put them in our cake tins. You're just gonna wanna try and split it up evenly as best as you can. We'll spread it around. Once our batter is in our cake tins, then we are going to put these in the oven at 350 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes, basically until a toothpick comes out clean in the center. All right, where those first two yellow layers are cooking, we are going to start our white layers. So I washed out my bowl, and then I went and got my whisk attachment that I'm gonna put on my mixer. We are gonna first start with the white layers. We're going to whip up the egg whites so that way they can have some stiff peaks. Once our egg whites have our stiff peaks, we'll transfer them to another container, and then eventually we'll put them right back in the mixer. The first time that I made this cake, I tried to whip the egg whites by hand, and let me just tell you, I was sweating. It was not worth it. Definitely worth it to do it in your mixer. Probably should have grabbed a bigger container. I wouldn't worry about getting every bit of this out there. We're going to put those egg whites right back in. We're gonna grab our paddle attachment and we will put that on our mixer. We're going to take the second half cup of butter. We're going to put that in there. We're gonna add the 1 cup sugar. We're going to cream those two together. Once your butter and sugar are creamed together, then we're going to add in back the egg whites and the vanilla. So we're gonna add in 1 teaspoon of vanilla and then our egg whites. Having our egg whites like this should give it a really nice and light, fluffy crumb texture for this white layer cake. We'll add in the vanilla. We're gonna mix that all together. Once that's all mixed together, we're going to add our dry ingredients in our bowl, and we need 2 cups flour. We're gonna do the 3 teaspoons baking powder. We're gonna do 1/2 teaspoon salt. We're gonna mix that all together. And then just like the yellow layers, we're going to alternate. We're gonna add some dry and we're gonna add our cup of milk, a little at each time, and we're gonna mix it together in our mixer. Once those white layers are all mixed together, we're going to then add them into our 9-inch round baking pans. If you need to wait for your other layers to come out first, to do that, you absolutely can. Just let the pans cool a tiny bit before you actually put the cake in there. Once I have these all spread out, I'm going to set them aside just for a few minutes while the yellow layers are finishing baking. Our yellow cake layers are done, so I'm gonna grab those out of the oven. I'm gonna put our white cake layers in. While these are cooling, I like to set them on a wire rack, and it'll help them cool from the bottom and the top. While those white layers are cooking and our yellow layers are cooling, we are going to make our citrus frosting. So we're gonna take an orange and we're going to zest it all the way around, and then we're gonna add the juice of the orange to it and some lemon juice to it as well. So let's first zest our orange. It's important when you're zesting to not get too into the white part, because that part's bitter and no one actually wants that. With this citrus frosting, we're actually going to let the orange juice, the zest, and the lemon juice sit for about 15 minutes while everything finishes cooking and cooling, and that way the zest and the juices, they can meld their flavors together to get us an even better, stronger orange flavor. We're gonna add the juice of 1 orange. I already squeezed a whole bunch of lemons into my jar here, so I'm just going to add 1 teaspoon of the lemon juice. We're gonna give that a little bit of a stir. Then we're gonna let that sit for about 15 minutes. So it's time to get these cakes out of these pans. They're cool enough to touch, which is usually my indication that they're good to come out of the pan. I will tell you, this is always the most nerve-wracking part for me. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. So I usually take a knife along the edges. And then we're just going to flip them. Voila, they turned out great. We're gonna let those keep cooling, and we're going to let our juice keep marinating, and I'll get everything set up so we can make the frosting and for our next layers to come out of the oven soon. All right, it looks like our white cake layers are done. I got everything else ready for us to make our frosting. So let's get those white cakes out of the oven. So you can see the difference in those cakes. The yellow cakes are meant to be a little bit more of that dense crumb, and then these white cakes are gonna be a little bit lighter and fluffier. So it's gonna make that great balance that we're gonna have in our vintage Easter cake. So we're gonna let these cool, and we're gonna move over and make our citrus frosting. We need to add our whisk attachment to our stand mixer. So our juice mixture that has been marinating for the past 15 minutes, we need to strain the orange zest out and put that in our bowl. So grab my strainer and we'll just strain that out. For this, you're gonna wanna use a fine mesh strainer, and then I just kind of push some of that pulp, get that juice out. So vintage cakes actually used to use eggs in the frosting, so we are going to use that here, and it just made it a little bit shinier, so we're gonna use an egg yolk. So I'm gonna take one egg, I'll separate the egg yolk and the egg white, and then I say keep the egg white for breakfast in the morning. Once we have the juice and the egg yolk in our bowl, then we are going to add the powdered sugar. This is where, if your orange was a little bit more juicy than my orange or less juicy than my orange, you're gonna want to make sure and adjust the powdered sugar. So I really like to use organic powdered sugar. This is a great brand. I also love the Thrive Market brand, or just any brand you can find at any grocery store. This bag happens to be 4 cups, which is what I put on the recipe. And again, but we're gonna adjust depending on what it is. This frosting also turns out to be a lot more runny than in general, like a typical cake frosting, what you might be used to. So I start with about half a bag. And then if it still looks a little runny, then we're going to add more powdered sugar. If you're making your frosting and you get it a little too thick, which happens sometimes, you can just add a little bit of cream to it and it will come back to the right consistency. All right, it's been long enough that we need to get these white cakes out and onto our cooling racks. Just like the yellow cakes, we're gonna take a knife around the edge and then hope and pray that it comes out clean. Success. All the layers are now gonna cool, and then once they are cool, we'll come back, we'll frost and decorate our 4-layer vintage Easter cake. All right, now that our cakes are cool enough, it is the fun part. We are going to now assemble them. We're gonna alternate layers. I'm gonna start with the yellow layer on the bottom. We're gonna go yellow, white, with a layer of frosting in between each layer. You don't want the frosting in the layers to be super thick, as you want to make sure you have enough frosting to put frosting on top as well. We'll add our final layer. You'll want to put the rest of the frosting on that top, and it'll be an open cake on the sides. And then you'll spread this around, obviously. And then pretty quickly before the frosting hardens, you're gonna wanna decorate it with some Easter candies. And there you have it, your 4-layer vintage Easter cake. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more from scratch recipes, and check out my website at my-colorado-kitchen.com. You'll get the full recipe there. And from my kitchen to yours, happy cooking!